Head to foot, knees to floor, shoulders to wall with glute contracted, abs to bench, and hams over calves without the back knee touching the floor. These aren't the only hip mobility drills, but these are the ones I use because they allow strength increase while scaling to any level. This scales by bench angle and progressing from assisted to unassisted to loaded. This scales by elevating the hips and reducing the load. This scales by how far back you go. So this would be a common starting point. This scales by bench angle and by loading method, dumbbell being easier because of the leverage and because of the safety. This scales by elevating the front foot and using assistance. This one is really important to me because my left knee was very tight after surgeries, but also my right knee, which was never operated on, had tibiofibular dislocation disease. That means that the bones on the outside here, when I would get into positions like this, would pop out. Unfortunately, this happens to a lot of people. Many have been misdiagnosed and had surgeries for something that didn't even handle the issue. By pinning the knee down, that was able to stop happening to me, and then I was able to open up these very muscles that I needed to get loose so that it would stop popping out. So this effectively ended that cycle. Once you're comfortable holding your body weight, you can even try to contract those outer muscles, almost thinking in a diagonal push and then stretch. I do 20 reps per set, 3 sets of 20 on my mobility day. And I actually get set up, then grab a weight in this hand and work with about 25% of my working weight for 8 reps on the ATG split squat. If you don't have a bench, elevating the glute can allow you to get some loading in there, and then I think to push that way. I would hold this for 30 seconds instead of the 20 reps. Before we move on, I want to shout out my biggest flexibility motivation. That is Kadur Ziani. He's been incredibly kind to me back before I had a bunch of followers. He's been a great mentor and he lives it. He's 49 years old, 5'11", and dunking. He's got the freakiest piriformis, that outer hip area flexibility that I've ever seen. So I would highly recommend studying from him in general about flexibility. This isn't the only way. This is just the gentlest, most scalable way, top to bottom, that I've found. And even the head to foot thing, that's just a test. That's not actually, as I've shown, how I spend my time stretching, which is instead just focusing on getting that muscle stronger through range of motion at my level. I get set up with 25% of my 8 rep split squat to the outside, bring my legs in. I actually use a pad so that my knees don't hit the floor, so they could actually stretch below that. And then I like to keep my fingers off. This way I'm really handling as much of the load as possible. Hold, stretch, and I actually squeeze my outer glutes and then flex up. This one was particularly helpful for me because I never thought I would get that knees to floor, and I never did until I started loading. So I've actually spent a lot less time stretching and instead loading it, getting stronger at my level. Now I can go knees to the floor, and I've stopped having groin tweaks in sports. So even with lots of groin stretching, I didn't notice that my groin tweaks stopped. So I think this helped, but I will say that I consider this one of 4 main groin injury prevention exercises. You have your loaded butterfly here, your seated good morning, more into the adductor length and strength, your ATG split squat, which also strengthens the adductors, but also opens up the hip flexors, and then just direct hip flexor strengthening. Those 4 together, for me, have given me a good base to stop having tweaks in the groin. I actually get into this sideways so I can safely get my shin flush against the wall without banging my knee. Then from here, I'm actually trying to contract my glute and breathe to this position. The shoulder check is really just at the end of the workout, kind of like the head to foot. I'm working here, and then I'm actually thinking to use these quad muscles pushing into the wall. For me, this was huge because my left knee, I was told, would never fully bend again. So it took a lot of patience. It was much tougher than the right. I had to gradually open up these quad muscles over time. So if you have surgical mass inside of a knee, you may have to be very patient. You may want to consider flossing. That's a specific type of band, and doing 20 floss squats before you stretch this. I haven't flossed in years. It's not clear to me whether or not the times I did that really helped, but a lot of people have reported so. And considering how cheap they are, I think it's worth looking into rather than just giving up on a joint. This brings up the question of this reverse Nordic that I can do now. I think this is more a byproduct of the couch stretch and the ATG split squat. I don't currently use this in programs other than the advanced zero program, which is where you're just training your legs with your own body weight. And so having to come up from that position can get you pretty strong. Still know you should use a ton of padding if you try that. You should only do that if you're having no problems with your knees and you've mastered the basics, and you can still use a band to reduce the resistance. So everything still scales. And for the record, it's totally normal to feel a stretch through the front of the quad. The reason I still consider this a hip mobility standard is because as you get more flexible and have the ability to contract that glute, well, now you can use your hips. You can use the backside of your hips, your lower back, your glutes, even better in sport. So I've noticed myself get into more positions like this in the air when I'm jumping compared to when I was tighter here. So this means I'm probably using my posterior chain even more. So it does become a hip mobility standard, even if it starts out feeling like a quad flexibility standard, and it is that too. I train this with the bar, and apologies because I don't have muscle clamps. You shouldn't be lifting like that. I'm just demoing, starting my home gym here. I use the weight that feels best. So if I have no weight, it's not gonna pull me down. I mean, I can get it down there, but it's not gonna pull me down the best it could. If I went like 225 pounds, then I would probably shorten up, or that's not a good place to fail in. So I'm working in the 135 range. That's actually taking me a lot of time to where 135 feels great. Further tips, I set up right here so that I have some man space when I go down. You could try sitting out at the edge, or you could create some space there. These are American-made ab mats, and actually, if your bench doesn't adjust incline, and look, most people will be comfortable with just a normal space there. You can also use this to regress the mobility. You can give yourself a target. So for example, you're training, okay, I can go down to 2 of those pads without rounding my back. Now I can get down to 1 and so on. For me, this was key to opening up my adductors, my inner thigh muscles, so I could be powerful in this position. I couldn't do the squat dunk thing until I brought in the seated good morning. So the ATG split squat plus the seated good morning allow me to do that squat dunk. But it's not just the straight ankle mobility that way. It's also that seated good morning that's opened up those inner thigh muscles and made me powerful from a bent position like this. I started this assisted. Now I feel great loaded. It's helped me develop the muscles around my knees as well as develop my knees internally while unlocking my ability to use my posterior chain, my hamstrings, glutes, lower back. Ultimately, my motivation for this is George Hackenschmidt, who worked a very similar position on 2 legs, full bend with the heels up. He has the greatest recorded jump longevity there is, jumping over hurdles in his 70s. Now for me, just like Kaddour Ziani with the flexible outer hips, and Kaddour is amazing in this position as well. The ATG split squat is not the only way that it can be done. It simply provides a really scalable, top to bottom measurable way for me to help myself and others do this. In conclusion, I typically use these once a week each as part of long-term full body programs, but I do use them up to 3 times a week as short-term targeted protocols. I have all my programs and protocols on site and app, and I try to have the lowest price for your form being coached to perfection under 24 hours, 7 days a week with no long-term contract. I also have all the equipment in this video in a link with all the discounts I could get for you in the description. Thank you for watching.